am an addict. Gosh, I'm nervous. I don't know why. Yeah, 4 years. If you told me 4 years ago that I'd be here today, I would tell you were lying. It's been an incredible journey with many humbling moments and hard lessons and some big realities that life is definitely worth living. So I feel honored to speak in front of all of you tonight, and I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of my journey, because I've been part of this group almost my entire clean time. And I honestly don't feel that I would be alive today if it wasn't for the people in these boxes. So to that, I am genuinely so appreciative. So I'll start with the experience. I came to recovery thinking I wasn't an addict. My life had become incredibly unmanageable. I had made a plan to die, and by the grace of God or my higher power, my sister intervened and caught me in a moment, and I broke, and I told her what my plan was. And she supported me in getting into therapy and starting to take care of myself. I successfully used drugs for 24 years of my life consistently every single day. I started at the age of 15 and I got clean at the age of 39. And it's interesting. I've restarted my step work with my sponsor, and I had a step work meeting with her on Saturday. And it's interesting, the imposter syndrome that comes in through recovery, because I think it's natural of us as human beings to compare it to others. And what she really reinforced to me on Saturday is that addiction isn't about the exterior, it's about the interior. Regardless of what our experiences were, the drugs we chose to use, we all came into this program feeling insane, out of control, not worthy, unloved, not being able to trust other people, and so many other things. And so I'm grateful to say that I'm starting to learn how to do some of these things today. So my life was not a hard life. I came from a good family. My parents both worked. They were both home. I'm the middle of three daughters in my family. And so I don't know if naturally the middle child is always the rebel. We'll go with that. I was something. And I never fit in. I was severely bullied in school, and it was in grade 9. I think I was 13 was my first suicide attempt. Thankfully unsuccessful, but it was definitely a dark period in my life. And I think I just went through life for so long feeling like I did not fit in, and that I was not loved, and that I wasn't worthy. And not to the fault of my parents, because I do believe that they did the best with what they had. But as I think now, with 4 years clean, and I look back on my family history, there's a lot of addiction on both sides of my parents and my mother's side of the family. And I find it interesting that it wasn't openly spoke about. It was just like, oh, that's Uncle Jimmy who's just drunk all the time, or that's whoever who's just high all the time. I have a cousin right now who's homeless in Toronto and addicted to heroin, and I wish I could reach out and pick him up. But again, we don't come to this process as unwilling participants. We each have to hit our bottom and figure this out on our own. And that's why we're part of the 1%, right? Like, if recovery was easy, we would all be here. We would all be alive. And so the best that we can do is carry the message to the best of our ability in whatever form that we can. So my bottom was my second suicide attempt. And so it's interesting to me. So many facets came into this. I got into therapy, and unbeknownst to me, my therapist was a recovery specialist, and I did not know this. And I remember when he first talked to me after about 6 months of therapy and saying, you know what, I don't think you have depression. I don't think you have an anxiety disorder. I don't think you're having panic attacks. He goes, I think you're an addict. And I said, I think you're fucking full of shit. that's not possible. And he's like, okay, well, let's go over the last 6 months of history of you telling me about using every single day, that is your main priority and drive in life is to get high. And maybe we'll think about this a little bit more. So it took me 8 months or 9 months to admit that, yeah, maybe I did have a problem. And I started going to meetings. And in the beginning, I think I was paying lip service to say, like I did what he told me to do because I am a person who is a perfectionist and wants the gold star and wants to win. That competitive nature in me is certainly there. No one's keeping score, by the way. No one's handing out awards. No one's handing out gold stars. And so it wasn't until I found my Canadian home group, which is an all-women's group called Soul Sisters, that I really started to hear the message. And I can remember, it's interesting thinking back as a newcomer, what that felt like. And for me, and I know for a lot of you in this room, you guys are like the beginnings of what the program is. And I'm kind of that newer generation where we got clean on the screen. So my experience of in-person meetings is very limited. And it's a terrifying thought of going and seeing people in person because I'm not good building relationships. I'm not good with the intimacy. So I started going to this meeting and I would, I'd sit there for the hour and then I would get high immediately after the meeting. And this was basically how it went for the first year, I would say. And within that period of time, started connecting with a woman and she's like, hey, like if you ever want to connect. And I'm like, okay, what do I got to lose? So I just started talking to her. And what's interesting is that if you start to talk to people within the program, you start to hear your own story within other people's voices and know that shared experience and that you're not alone. And she had so many similarities. We often joke that we share the same brain just because the way that we think is just so fucking similar. And so I remember when she first started talking to me about she would give me suggestions about ways to reduce. If you feel like you need to pick up again, give me a call instead of going and picking up. And so I started to do some of these things. I started to reduce how much I was taking. I started to pick up the phone or call her or send her a message at least. And and eventually we got into the conversation of sponsorship. And I said, what is a sponsor? How does this work? And what are you supposed to do? It's a very intimidating process to talk to someone about sponsorship because it's like asking someone out. And I'm like, I've been married for 20 years. I don't know. I haven't dated anyone since I was 18 years old. I have no idea what that is. And rejection is terrifying. And so I said, well, what do you do for your sponsorship? And she kind of explained it to me. And I was like, okay, all right. And I said, well, would you ever consider being my sponsor? And she's like, I've just been waiting weeks for you to ask me. She's like, yeah, absolutely. I will be your sponsor. And she has been my sponsor ever since. And I'm very lucky that I got her even while I wasn't clean because it gave me perspective into things and allowed me to have an avenue to be able to share things vulnerably and honestly with her without having a pressure of someone saying, you need to be clean to be in these rooms. Because I know I've talked to people who think that is the case, that you have to be clean to walk into these rooms, and you absolutely do not. You can be like me. I was told you go to your meeting. If you're high, you shut your mouth and you don't say anything. You just sit there. But if you're clean, you can talk. And that's what I did. Is I wouldn't say anything if I was high in a meeting, and if I wasn't, then I was getting high afterwards. But eventually, the shit started to sink in. And so I remember the day 4 years ago, May 10th. It was like something just clicked in my brain, and I said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And that was the last day that I used any drugs, which is crazy. Because if you take half your life in this behavior and compulsion and obsession of this activity that you do on a daily basis, and then all of a sudden it's not there, it's like, wow, man, first, the grieving of all of the time that I lost And I still have a lot of shame and guilt around that, but I also know that there's hope, that there is tons of opportunity, that there are people who get clean in their 60s and still live very rewarding lives, or even older. I've met people who are like, I'm 75 and I've been clean 6 months. Like, it's an incredible feat. And I think what propelled some of my recovery, so in my first 30 days, I experienced my first loss. I'm an equestrian person, so I love horses, and horses have been part of my life, always part of my life. And I owned a horse who was like my soul. Anyway, she died completely unexpectedly within my first 30 days of being clean, and I'd never experienced grief clean before. My dad had died, and I can remember being high at his funeral and not really remembering what went on, and experiencing other loss and trying to support others while they're going through loss. And then 6 days after that, my older sister let us know that she was diagnosed with cancer. And so I said, you know what, I put myself first for so many years. I took a leave of absence from work, and I stayed with my sister for 2 months while she went through chemo treatment. And I truly feel, and she is okay, by the way, she is in remission and cancer-free for 3 years now, 3.5 years. But I don't know if it's twisted, but I feel that was a higher power moment, that I was able to show up for her, but also show up for myself, because it gave me an opportunity of 2 months of going to solid meetings 3 times a day for those 2 months that I lived with them, which I do believe kept me in the program and kept me solid. And I wouldn't change any of that, as scary and terrifying and all of those things, but it also taught me how to help people without wanting something in return, not having an opportunity to manipulate because there was nothing to manipulate, how to deal in difficult situations. Because if you've ever taken care of someone who has cancer or any sort of ailment, you quickly learn that people who are out of control try and control everything. Does that sound familiar? And it gave me an opportunity to see that on the flip side, that her behaviors and her actions were because she felt out of control and was trying to control what was happening in her life. And it was really nice that I could show up for her and be present. And thank God she's okay. But through recovery, I think some of the things that I have experienced is that I have a husband. We've been married since we were 19. Our entire relationship was using. And so it's been an interesting journey of the last 4 years of figuring out who we are as partners, what our marriage looks like, because he still uses, not as much as before. It's actually it's reduced quite a lot. But when 24 years of a relationship all of a sudden is no longer surrounded by daily use, it becomes this giant void, and you're and you're trying to figure out who the hell you are, let alone what your relationship is. And that's been an interesting journey. And I can say I'm very glad to say today that we've come to a place where we can be just together and starting to figure out what communication looks like and intimacy. Because like so many others who come into this program, intimacy to me meant sex, and that's not what intimacy is even about. And so it's nice to be able to do that. And I've started to build relationships with other people. And again, it's not a two-way or a one-way street, it's a two-way street. And so things that I've learned over the last 4 years is that thank God for the tried and true who stick by you, even when you completely ghost people for months. Because my absolute go-to from a character defect standpoint is isolation. And then I do this thing where if I haven't spoken to someone for a certain period of time, then this guilt and shame builds up with me. And then I'm like, well, it's just so much easier to cut this person completely out of my life than try and reach out to them again. So I'm trying to break that cycle which is difficult. And my sponsor and I have talked about this a lot. She's like, this is something for you to be hyper aware of, because these are the types of behaviors and defects that can bring you out of the rooms if you're not careful. So some of the daily habits that I've started to do in the last couple of years is share, to the best of my ability, a daily gratitude list with 4 or 5 women. So we do this every day. So even when you feel like absolute garbage, or maybe they feel like garbage, it forces you to shift your perspective and your mindset to say, you know what, I have been a very negative person my whole life, and everything has been against me, and it's nothing. I could never be wrong. And sometimes it's about saying, you know what I did really well today is I got out of bed and I had a shower. I'm grateful for that. I saw a beautiful bird in my backyard, and I'm grateful for that. I was able to own and make amends to somebody, and I'm grateful for that. I have awareness to my character defects. Although I can't control my addiction, I am starting to learn my patterns and control some of my actions, and I'm grateful for that. So it's, I love that. When I first got into the room, you think you know everything. 4 years later, I think I know nothing. And I'm sure 4 years from now, I'll think I'll know everything. And then 4 years from then, I think I'll know nothing. But here are the things that I know for sure are true. If you're on the fringes of your recovery, you're 2 steps away from relapse. If you're in the middle of your recovery, you're building a strong foundation and staying spiritually strong. And this is where connection becomes exceptionally important. So for anyone else who's like me and likes to isolate or is not good at the people thing, it's worth the effort. Because even if it's just that one person, that person can save your life. So I'm really starting to have an understanding that I have to continue these relationships, and it's not just about them reaching out to me, it's about me caring about them. And so some of the things that I've learned has been helpful is catching a newcomer in a meeting and trying to get their number. And if they're like me, well, they're probably not going to message me back, but it's better to get out of myself and care about somebody else, because that, again, gives them that safe space to potentially, you could save their life that time. And the less that I am stuck sitting in my own insane thoughts, the better it is, because they certainly can bring you down some troubling paths. So I joke, I call my addiction Sandra. And so my close friends know that if I'm like, ooh, Sandra is screaming today, they know that, okay, something's happening. But it's kind of funny, I think, to have little code words and things like that, and just so people have an understanding to what that is. And so now I'm learning to put trust in a higher power, and it's taken me a long time to believe that it's anything more than just a group. I think after doing a full round of the 12 steps, it's only at the end of that I started to kind of really feel some level of connection to something bigger beyond myself. And so I do a simple daily practice where every morning I say thank you or help, and thank you for being a presence in my life. And at the end of the day, I just say thank you and just leave it at that. Meditation for me are just simple moments of mindfulness. This is something my sponsor taught me to do. I think because I've worked in corporate finance my entire career, your mind is always going, because it's like, how do we get the next sale? How do we get more revenue? How do we get more customers? How do we temper this team argument? Blah, 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 blah. Keep the bigwigs happy, all that kind of stuff. And so my mind is always busy, and I'm also a person who awfulizes everything. So that one thing happened, and now I think everybody's going to die. So we've been working on taking even 10 seconds a day and just letting yourself settle and notice whatever that is. And I've been doing this now for a few years, and it's really helped center myself. I'm a smoker still, so I often do this outside on a smoke break. And it's genuinely being in nature seems to help. Even in a cement parking lot, you can notice the birds, you can notice the clouds, you can notice this big, beautiful world that's so much bigger than whatever crazy thing is going through my mind. And it allows me to have the freedom to know that this is just a moment and things, there is hope. There absolutely is hope. And I think for a long time, I really truly believe that there wasn't. I talked to my sponsor this weekend just about, again, I say the importance of relationships and connection, but I still very much struggle with this. And I find it really difficult to let people know who I am because I feel like I don't fit in. And then I feel like I'm compromising myself to feel like I fit in. And I know a lot of that's in my own mind, but she's such a loving and caring and gentle soul. I love this woman to death. And she's like, well, just know that you have that with me. And this is where I truly believe if you cannot say that I have this best sponsor in the program, then you don't have the right sponsor at all. And I would be devastated if this person wasn't in my life anymore. And I think to compromise and making things work. So my sponsor lives in New Zealand. So we have an 18-hour time difference. And she was my sponsor for 2.5 years before I ever met her in person. So it just shows that connections can happen over a distance, over a screen, over a phone. One of my favorite moments ever, I don't know, year 1 or 2, I think it was, but meeting a few of the ladies in this group at the Albany convention, which was kick-ass and awesome. I think you were the first people I probably ever hugged at NA. So that was pretty epic. I love you guys so much, and that was so special. If we can ever do that again, that would be incredible. I will tell you, though, from a convention standpoint, I was clean just a year, and I went to the Orkney convention with myself and a friend who had 8 months clean, and we had never been to an in-person anything in our lives, and it was the most overwhelming experience. We were both like, let's never do this ever again. So I would suggest if you're like me and you got clean on the screen, maybe go to an in-person meeting with a few people before you attempt a convention with like 500 people. It was extreme. Like, why are people touching me? This is a terrible experience. But there's also different styles of conventions. I specifically really love the Albany convention. That was amazing. But anyway, as I remiss, some of the things that have helped me stay in the rooms, because I often don't want to show up to meetings, I often don't want to be a part of, and that's service. And money isn't something I necessarily can give easily, but I can certainly give my time. So I try to do that to the best of my ability. So I hold a service position in my Canadian home group. I hold a service position here. I've done area in our Ottawa area, and I just try and do whatever little piece that I can, because that makes me feel a part of, and it keeps me in the middle of my recovery. And so when I know I'm not feeling like I want to show up, I take a service position, because I know that I am accountable to the people that show up here, and I want to ensure that recovery is held for everyone, and it's not just about me. It's nice to be in a position to not be so self-centered. It's a real change in perspective, and for that I am forever truly grateful. Oh, I feel like I'm rambling at this point. All I know is that without this program, I would not be alive. Without these meetings that I come to every week, I would not be here. Without these people that I see in these screens tonight, recovery wouldn't have been possible. You are the 12th step, and I thank you for showing up and sharing that message, building a program that continues to evolve over time, that we each individually get to share the message in our own way. And I truly appreciate how vulnerable and honest people are in this meeting, and that truly means so much to me, because I think it's so easy to put people on pedestals based on clean time, but clean time means nothing if you don't have a program. And I really believe that the people in this room specifically have a really solid program, because you share honestly. And I love that so much. It's like, Julie, I'm going to call you out, but like, I love how you're like, yo, my life is unmanageable or shit is going on or whatever. And Trina, I always love how after every meeting you're like, I gotta go, I gotta eat. I'm gonna it's just like, you guys have the best messages and you're just so honest about where you're at. Karen and Bob, I know you guys are heavily involved in spreading the message on a professional level too, that I so appreciate. Mary, you're one of my favorite humans in the entire world and I love you so much. Adam, you're a brilliant soul who continues to show up and be honest and vulnerable every meeting. I love each and every one of you. Joanne and Phil, you're two of my favorite people. I like you share such a beautiful message. And I thank you so much, Joanne, for being here and doing this for me tonight. With that, I'm going to stop rambling. And I